I mean, the entrepreneur, the CEO, is often the best salesman. They're the most committed. And we hate being salesmen, but every business needs sales. If you don't have sales, you don't have a business.
Today we have Rael Bricker, a Business Excellence International speaker, author, mentor, and coach. He's a certified virtual presenter and the podcast host of the Business Excellence podcast. Welcome, Rael.
Good morning. Good morning, Ryan. How are you?
Doing very well, thank you. Rael, I'm interested. You've got a lot of experience. What's your story, and how did you get started?
Well, my first entrepreneurial experience was at 14. I went into a business and I realized a very quick lesson. I was working in an electronics shop and I decided that I would install car radios in the days when they weren't fancy fitted radios in cars. And I realized very quickly that anything I do in life needed to be with my brains, not my hands. And that's just a personal thing. Although I love tinkering and doing woodwork as a hobby, I realized very early on that I needed to use my brain and my intellect rather than my hands to do any business. And so I've started a couple businesses in my life, been through that road, but interestingly, none of them were overthought. I see too many people today who overthink it. They get to spreadsheet number 27 and go, yeah, I'm not sure this business is going to work. Well, that's 26 too many spreadsheets. It's a crazy thing. So yeah, my first major business was in 1990. It started as a management consultancy, which in and of itself is crazy. I was a 26-year-old MBA with a 26-year-old partner, also an MBA grad. And we thought we'd teach the world how to run their businesses when we'd never run a business ourselves. So therein lies the first flaw. And we started and we actually won contracts, which is even more bizarre thinking about it. But they were short-lived and they didn't last more than 6 months. And after that, we said, oh my God, what are we going to do now? We've given up good jobs. Let's do something. And it was suggested to us, we started a school teaching marketing, or at the time, a diploma in marketing, because we were well qualified and could do that. You've got to contextualize that into South Africa of 1990, when Nelson Mandela was released in February 1990. There was a hunger amongst the previously disadvantaged population, the majority of the population, to get an education, to get ahead. So it was one of those, we were in the right place at the right time. We didn't overthink the college idea of starting a school. We just started it. And we had 20 students our first semester. And 5 years later, when we reverse listed the business, we had 4,000 students, 6 campuses, and 5,000 square meter building in Johannesburg.
Wow.
So, it was a great ride, a great fun journey. Touched some amazing lives, and that's a story for later. But we touched some amazing lives in that story in that time. And yeah, I decided by 96 that the political environment was becoming very unstable, and we had an opportunity to reverse list it, and I had a year's commitment to stay on. Then I did that. And I then got into venture capital after doing mergers and acquisitions and selling out venture capital for 3 years in South Africa, then came to Australia, got a job in venture capital for 2 years. But then my entrepreneurial spirit kicked in again, and I need to be my own boss. I need to make my own decisions and fail on my own sword. And so I went into private funding of venture capital, or helping people find venture capital investors. And then they said, oh, we need a loan. And I went, okay, I don't know how to do that, but I'll find out. And interestingly, someone asked me the other day, what's the key to success in dealing with customers? And I said, the ability to say, I don't know, but I'll find out.
Yes.
If I was, one of my success stories in life is being able to do that. So I said to customers, I don't know, but I'll find out. And I found out I had to be called a finance broker in Australia. So I became a finance broker. And then they said, geez, you did such a good job for our business. Can you do our home loans? So I said, well, sure, I'll find out how to do that. And went off and started doing home loans. And that was 21 years ago. And we've done 3 billion in mortgages since then. So that business grew dramatically.
That's fantastic.
So I still own that business. My studio that we're recording this from is in those offices. I spend about 50% of my time still in that business and 50% of my time as a professional speaker. And then the key that drove me to professional speaking was 7 years ago when I was training for a marathon after doing triathlons, and I ended up having 2 cardiac stents. I dodged a bullet. I never had a heart attack, thankfully.
Wow.
I was picked up before that, but it really focused me on what I want to do and what I want to do with my life. Even though I was 50 at the time or 49, I want to be on stage speaking. I had sold $1 billion of mortgages from stage to build a mortgage business. And I really love being on stage and sharing ideas with people. And so that's how I evolved into professional speaker, certified speaking professional, virtual speaker, and built the studio in Perth from which I'm talking to you.
Great. And what does an average day look like for you now? About half in the mortgage business, half speaking. Do you travel with with
Well,
COVID and
where
that kind of
travel
thing?
would be fun. Remember those days?
Yeah.
Up to middle of, up to 2020, early 2020, I was traveling. I spent 4.5 months traveling the world in 2019. Um, got to do some really cool things as a professional speaker. So I opened a conference in Kathmandu in Nepal, and then the next day I went to see the sunrise over Everest. So,
Wow.
we had some really cool experiences as a speaker. We got to touch some people's lives, help them on their journey to excellence, in lots of places. Right now, it's probably 70% mortgages, just because the Australian mortgage market has gone stupid.
Mm.
It's gone crazy busy. But I'm still in the background planning 2022, when I hopefully will be back on the international circuit if the WA government actually ever lets us out of WA.
Yes, I definitely hear that. And
Yeah.
so, where do you feel most inspired? Like when do you feel like your best self?
Well, okay, so two things. I actually use the definition of excellence. You introduced me as the business excellence speaker.
Yes.
Excellence, in my definition, is showing up as the best version of yourself every day.
Mm.
So that we can never achieve perfection. So by definition, what is excellence? It is showing up as the best version of yourself every day. So I love the adrenaline of being on a big stage, 1,000 people, 1,500 people. The biggest audience I've had is about 2,000, although some of my colleagues have had 20,000. But I've only been going for 5.5 years as a professional speaker. But the the adrenaline of being on a big stage is fantastic. But interestingly, COVID taught me something else. So during 2020, or from 2019, 2020, I launched a 4-month small business academy, and that'll be part of the offer we'll talk about at the end of the podcast. But I launched a 4-month small business academy aimed at small and medium businesses. So a little bit bigger than solopreneurs, you know, 2 to 20, 2 to 30 employees, that kind of size. And I did 4 of those academies in 2020. And there I saw real change happening in people, because I worked with them every week for a couple of hours over a 4-month period. And then we masterminded after that for another 6 months.
Mm.
And so that 12-month period for me really taught me that although I love the adrenaline of the big stage, the self-satisfaction, where do I feel I'm showing up as my best self, is in a classroom of 10 people. And I've built a hybrid classroom as well, where I have people in the classroom and online simultaneously. And we interact and banter with each other, both in the classroom and online. It took a while to get the tech right, but it worked. That's where I'm most alive, is that one-on-one, really getting to understand people's businesses and really seeing real incremental change over the long period. You do a 45-minute keynote or even a 1-day workshop, you walk out of there, there's no feedback loop that tells you 3 months later what they're doing. Whereas that one-on-one interaction is fantastic. That's what makes me feel alive.
That's great. And you've built a business that is very much around your core values of helping other businesses and helping people achieve their dreams. So, Rael, what advice would you give to a business owner or CEO who wants to break through to that next level in their business without sacrificing their soul in the process?
Okay, so I mean, there's a couple of things. You obviously have to stay true to your core. And in fact, so much so that in the mortgage business, I have fired staff previously where they are felt acted unethically. Okay, and so the two cornerstones of any business, and that's in my working and consulting and speaking business career, is about culture and ethics forming the cornerstone of any business. Now, that you can't create excellence without culture, without a rich and robust culture, and without an ethical line in the sand. My book that I published in 2018, the working title of the book until literally a month before we published it was Give Up Control to Gain Control. Okay, give up control to gain control. And that is where I was asked a lot in the mortgage business. I was the first brokerage independent to get to 2 billion in settlements, and one of a handful to 3 billion. And people asked me, what was the key to my success? And I said, I gave up control of the day-to-day stuff that I knew I could do, but I wasn't efficient at. And I got control of my life. And the problem with entrepreneurs, CEOs, solopreneurs, when they get their first staff member, they micromanage. They get their 10th staff member, some of them still micromanage. And they'll go, oh, it's quicker for me just to do that myself, right? I'm not going to, you're not doing it right or to my standards. But if you don't empower your team, and so you said I built up a culture that embodies what I do. Yeah, absolutely. It's about empowering my team. My team, I tell them, I don't mind if they fail. In fact, I prefer it if they fail a couple of times. No, that's terrible. But I want them to fail so that they can get better. But I don't look down on failure. I say there's nothing wrong with sending an apology email to a client that says, I'm sorry, I messed up. The actual thing I should have told you is this. That's okay too.
Great. And so what advice would you give to a CEO or a manager, business owner who is a bit prone to micromanagement? What kind of things can they do to shift that behavior and shift their mindset?
Well, I think the simplest thing to do is to draw take a whiteboard and put two columns on it and put write $10 on the one column and $500 on the other. And the left-hand column, let's call it the $10 column, is where you write down all the tasks. Maybe it's $20 now per hour that you're paying staff, but all the tasks you do in your business that you could outsource for $20 an hour. And then you write down all the things you could do to generate $500 an hour. Okay. And that'll focus you on what's important. I mean, the entrepreneur, the CEO, is often the best salesman. They're the most committed. And we hate being salesmen, but every business needs sales. If you don't have sales, you don't have a business. It doesn't matter what you do. If you don't sell, and I hate saying I'm a great salesman, but I think I am. I've done incredibly well in all my businesses in the business to consumer space. And so for me, it's about the advice is you take those two columns and you look at what are the things I'm really good at doing that are going to generate $500 an hour? And what are the things I'm pretty average at that are going to cost me $20 an hour to employ someone to do? And then you employ somebody and you empower them to do those things. If you're an OCD micromanager, besides, taking a drug, there was a cartoon I saw once, and it was a TV repairman. And he said to the person whose TV he was repairing, he said, are you an engineer? And the guy said, yes. He said, take these pills. And the engineer said, what are they? He said, they're engineer pills. He said, what are engineer pills? He says, they're going to knock you out for 2 hours so I can actually do my job correctly.
I love
And so
that.
the OCD boss needs to take OCD boss pills. They need to actually let their staff, when I interview staff, I use the phrase, it's a bit harsh, but I use it anyway. It says, I'm going to give you a piece of rope, pull yourself out the water or hang yourself. It's your choice. And don't be afraid to ask questions. I've only employed one staff member in the last 7 years. not because I have a small team, just because I have incredible longevity in my team. And my newest staff member started about 6 weeks ago, and it's amazing the culture that we've created, where she just spends her day asking everyone questions, and she's learning and like a sponge and sucking it up.
Mm.
And I've created an environment that says it's okay to fail.
Through being conscious of creating that specific culture.
Yeah, absolutely. So she came in, and it's a warm, friendly, bantering culture where, by example, even my most senior person in the mortgage business I will sit in the middle of the open plan area and brainstorm or workshop deals with him that I'm working on. So I'm showing my own fallibility, and he's workshopping his own deals with me, as are other brokers. And so any new staff member coming in goes, wow, that's an amazing collaborative environment.
Mm.
That's an amazing environment where we can ask questions, where no one is expected to know the answer. One of the principles in my book, one of the chapters is called, what is an expert? An expert is not someone who knows the answer. It's someone who knows where to find the answer.
I like that. That's a really good definition. Um, and so, Rael, you've had a lot of success. What are some of the challenges that you've had that have that you've overcome that you can say have been key to achieving the levels of success that you have now?
Um, the biggest is probably imposter syndrome. I know that sounds like a weird contradiction, but But until I got really comfortable with being the business excellence guy, the branding and doing everything around that excellence, I had was this bubbly, I've got so much to tell you environment. And then I'd go, does anyone really want to know? I mean, a good example is my book. I started writing the book in 2015. I wrote 30,000 words, and I went, yeah, yeah, it's a nice story for me. It's reminded me of a lot of things I've done in my life. No one wants to hear it. And I put the book away for 2 years.
Wow.
And I was in South Africa doing some consulting work. A company I'd been working with flew me out to do a one-day workshop for their team on building culture. And I happened to have dinner that night with a cousin of mine whose wife had been in the book industry for 25 years and had just started her own publishing business. And she'd published 3 or 4 books at that stage, and I told her about it, and she said, email it to me. And before I left South Africa 2 days later, she said, I've read your draft, write another 10,000 words so we've got place to edit stuff out, and send it to me, and we'll publish it. And that's how, it took another 6 months from there to actually get published, 2.5 years after I wrote the book.
Wow, that's very cool.
You know,
And
so every time, I think the whole idea of imposter syndrome is, so again, I'll go back to the book. In the intro, I speak about the fact that sometimes I mix up confidence, overconfidence, and arrogance. And it's taken me into my 50s to understand the difference between them. And so sometimes it's exactly that. I believe I have incredible depth of knowledge to offer businesses and to offer business owners and CEOs in terms of growing and evolving their businesses. Is my expertise, for instance, in digital? No, it isn't. And I'm the first to admit that. I understand digital. I have a master's in software engineering. Am I a specialist in that area? Not at all. But I can apply every other principle of a business around that. I know where my limitations are. But even then, you still get to a point where you're going, oh, I'm running this mastermind group and everyone's telling me they're really enjoying it. Are they just pulling my chain? So that's the more current stuff. The other thing that I firmly believe is that you go into business without the 27 spreadsheets that I spoke about at the beginning. And so a principle is that's why the book currently is called Dive In. Okay. It's actually, the name of the book is Dive In, Lessons Learned Since Business School. And the reason it's that is because it's about diving in and adjusting your course while you're moving. Because if you have the static business plan, if you have the static plan that you're going, that's all we're doing, you'll never be successful. And so to get over yourself, to get out, sometimes we have to get out of our own way in order to be successful. We have to get out of our own way and stop our own limitations, our own self-limiting beliefs, which we call them imposter syndrome, we call them self-limiting beliefs. There's lots of different terminologies, but at the end of the day, it's saying, I have value to add, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I love that. And so, Rael, if you could go back 5 years and give yourself one bit of advice, what would that look like?
5 years would have been get my branding sorted a lot quicker. Okay.
Yeah.
It took me probably the better part of the last 5 years as a speaker. So my branding on my home loan business, it's been going 21 years. That's been fairly constant for a long time. I would have spent much more time defining the brand early on, and using that branding. It only really evolved the last 2 to 3 years. 5 years ago, I was trying to be all things to all people, try and fix every kind of vehicle under the sun, and I'm not a mechanic. That was kind of where I was at, because I had written this book and had all this information in about business, and I was trying to be everything to everyone. And I needed to focus on quite specific areas.
Yeah, great. And what did you end up focusing on?
So in terms of excellence, or I've really brought it down to, there are three components to excellence, or to business excellence, and that is leadership, culture, and strategy. Mm-hmm. And if we look at the relationships of those three things together, and you say, well, if you have a great strategy but no leadership, or no great culture, it's not going to work. And so you need to get to that middle bit, which is where three circles interact. And that interaction point is what I call the return on culture, because I believe culture drives everything. I believe culture and organization is going to drive the success, or alternatively the failure. But what are the components of culture? So, there are all the practical things you need to do. You have to have the right people and the diversity in your teams and your systems in place and your finance, all those business things. That's what I work through on the academy. I work through that market positioning, target marketing, sales process, etc. All that sort of deep level practical stuff. But if you go up one level, or to an outer shell of the organization, you need to have leadership in place, a strategy, and a culture. And that's the other thing I work through, is how to put those three things together to drive the business forward.
Because that's going to be slightly different for every business, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And culture is going to look different for every business. And so what is leadership for every business? Leadership is not what I'd call, so one of the things we do, and seeing we're on video, I can actually do this trick. Okay, this is called the Excellence Cube. Okay, there we go, the Excellence Cube, right?
I like it.
I'll bring it closer to the camera so you can see it nicely, right?
Yeah.
It's called the Excellence Cube. And really what it has is, on the bottom of it, it has 4 quadrants where you can work out people's behaviors. According to a 2x2 matrix, you can work out what kind of behaviors people exhibit in the workforce. And then the rest of the cube, so if you pick up somebody is a green behavioral style, there it is, green on the top, then you go to the green side of the cube, and it'll actually tell you how to communicate with them. What are they motivated by? How do they react under stress? Okay. And so leadership for some people is just learning how to communicate. It's not being the showman, the Bill Clinton of the world, the Donald Trump of the world. And I'm using those particular examples because they had quite different behaviors, but they were both president of the US, as was Barack Obama. 3 very different people, but all president of the United States, all right? But if you take those 3 people, and they all had different behaviors, but they were all leaders in their own way. And so leadership is not, but the interesting part of it is the leaders learn how to communicate with everyone else. And so when I talk about leadership in the organization, it's about getting to know the behaviors of your team and how to communicate with them. When you do a strategy, it's about not going to the mountain and smoking a few joints and coming back with, this grand plan for what's going to
And
happen in the organization. It's
enlightenment.
about, yeah, it's about inclusivity. It's about bringing the team with you on that journey. Kennedy, one of the Kennedys went to NASA in 1962, long when they were just starting the space race. And there's a famous story told of him seeing a cleaner sweeping furiously. And he went up to the cleaner and he said, "How come you sweeping so furiously?" And he said, "I'm doing my bit to help put a man on the moon." Okay. And so when you can devolve a culture like that, where every single person in the organization, no matter what their role, sees it as something greater than themselves, then you've created that ideal return on culture where you have a strategy. I mean, NASA had a strategy. They wanted to put a man on the moon. Did they have leadership? Absolutely. They had great visionary leaders, and they had a culture embodied by that cleaner who was sweeping furiously because he saw his role as helping get a man on the moon.
Excuse me. I love that example, Rael. That's that really does encapsulate all three areas of an effective organization. So, Rael, tell us, who can you best help and how can they get in touch with you?
Okay, so I'll start with the simple bit is raelbricker.com is the or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. So that's all possible. Who do I help? I help two groups of people. So on the big stage, as I call it, the keynoting, the workshops, anything from a 45-minute keynote to a 2-day or 3-day workshop on leadership, culture, strategy for an organization, or I'll work with an organization to develop a culture strategy and develop their leadership team. That's what I call the big end of town. That's sort of the 50 to 200, 300, 500 employees. It's the bigger end of town. The small end of town, I hate the term SME because everyone thinks that even if they're a medium enterprise, they don't want to be classified with small. But anything from 2 to 20 employees, I run an academy program. It takes 4 months. As I said, I run it hybrid as well. So I run people in the classroom in Perth with people online. I've had people all around the world on my last couple of academies. And that runs for 4 months. And that really takes a deep dive into people's individual organizations and looks at, it starts off, for instance, the first 3 areas we look at are the why. Now, Simon Sinek obviously made famous the start with why. It starts with why, but we start off looking at the why of the organization, the why of the drivers, the CEO, the entrepreneur who started it. What's their driver, and how does that align with the why of the business? Because if you don't have that alignment, it's never going to be successful. And then from there, we move into much more about the product, what's your product and how does that relate to these behavioral styles? I bring all this into individual products. As an example, when you're training a sales staff, if you understand that your customers exhibit those 4 behavioral styles, and if think about the last time you went to look at a real estate, at a house, you walk in and what does the typical realtor do? They start talking and they tell the same story to every single person who walks through that door because they haven't taken the 2 minutes to actually ask a couple probing questions to understand what's important to that person. And so we teach as part of this academy how you focus your product on the 4 different behavioral styles in the world and how your messaging goes out differently and how that affects your social media. So I said, I'm not a digital marketing expert, but I can talk about how the social media and the advertising is going to be targeted at 4 different behavioral groups. And then, but this is a very practical, people have to be very interactive, have to share about their business. And it's a peer-driven and instructor-led 4-month academy. And so that's what I call the SME space. And then the big end of town is all the keynotes and workshops that I run.
That's great. And
long explanation of the academy, but it's an amazing academy. So
yeah, and we can actually get a copy of your book as well, can't we?
yeah, so there is we'll go there. It's very simple, railbricker.com. The URL is railbricker.com/free book. For anyone who would like to download a free PDF copy of the book. I mean, you're welcome to go to Amazon and buy it, or Booktopia, or any other online seller. They're pretty much on all the online sellers. But if you'd like a free PDF version, railbricker.com/free book. If anyone would like a copy of this cube, this communications cube, flick me a message on LinkedIn and I will send it off. And we have a special offer for your listeners. We will have a discount code for anyone wanting to pursue the Academy program that'll be starting early in 2022. Gotta find the right years. This last one's disappeared.
It's interesting because as we stay at home more and more, all of the days just kind of blend into one. It probably isn't good, and so they're able to get a discount on the academy
On
if
the
they're
Academy
interested.
program?
Yep.
Correct. Yeah.
Perfect. That's
So,
great.
yeah, so we run the academy. It runs for 4 months and then it continues for another 6 months. So approximately 12 months in total. I say 4 months, but they roll into each other, and then 6 mastermind groups after that, where we implement what they've learned in the academy in their own individual businesses.
Fantastic. So it's both theory and practical.
Absolutely.
Rael, thank you so much for providing us a ton of value today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been fun. I love, after the scare I had in 2013 with my heart, I really found out that my heart needed to be in a place of sharing and bringing other people along on this journey of excellence.
And you're certainly in the process of doing that. Thank you for sharing today.
Thank you.